The 9,894th meeting of the Security Council is called to order. At the outset, I would like to remind everyone that the Security Council is a place of respect among members of the organization, respect vis-à-vis their representatives. And I thank the speakers in advance for observing appropriate standards of tone, wording, and content in their remarks. The provisional agenda for this meeting is Resolutions 1160, 1998, 1199, 1998, 1203, dating 1998, 1239, dating 1999, and 1244, dating 1999 of the Security Council. The agenda is adopted.
Conseil de sécurité va...
The Security Council will now begin its consideration of item 2 of the agenda. I give the floor to Madame Ziadeh.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, Excellencies, distinguished members of the Security Council, ladies and gentlemen. I wish to congratulate France on its presidency of the Security Council during the month of April. Congratulations, Mr. Ambassador. It is an honor for me to present to the Council the recent developments which have taken place in Kosovo since the publication of the Secretary General's report, which covers the period dating 16 September 2024 to 15 March 2025, and to share with you a few key observations.
Monsieur le Président,
Mr. President,
the conduct of the elections on the 9th of February was notably peaceful, although not without technical complications and appeals by political parties. It was especially encouraging to note the gains in women's representation, which resulted in women increasing their presence in the Kosovo Assembly without relying on the 30% gender quota foreseen by the law on general election. I congratulate the people of Kosovo on yet another peaceful and inclusive election. Following the certification of the results on the 27th of March, I look forward to the timely formation of the next government, recognizing that this might require complex negotiations. Once in place, it is imperative that concrete steps will be taken to prioritize the well-being of the people of Kosovo, as well as the implementation of commitments made under the EU-facilitated dialogue, and advance on the process of normalization of relations. After the appointment of Mr. Peter Sorensen as the new EUSR for the Belgrade-Pristina dialogue in January, I look forward to working closely with him. His early engagement offers an opportunity to support both sides in making headway. The progress made in December, when Belgrade and Pristina agreed on the terms of reference for the Joint Commission on Missing Persons, should inspire them all to move forward in other areas of the dialogue. I urge all to make full use of this Joint Commission in tandem with the existing working group on missing persons to proceed without further delay and help families obtain clarity on the fate of their loved ones. In this context, I wish to commemorate the passing of Mr. Bayram Cherkand, father of a missing son who dedicated decades of his life to advocate for the right to know, whose efforts spanned communities and ethnicities and embodied the shared humanity of all affected. His legacy continues to guide this work, and UNMIK remains committed to supporting the Missing Persons Resource Center and all families still seeking answers. Mr. President, when I visited northern Kosovo on 25th of March, civil society interlocutors, political and community leaders alike pointed to a continued trust deficit, particularly vis-à-vis the institutions, while also sharing concerns about what lies ahead given the current political context and developments in the region and beyond. They lamented the unilateral actions taken by the Pristina authorities, including the recent closures of Serbia-run centers of social welfare and the adverse socio-economic impact this has had. Nevertheless, they saw no alternative to the EU-facilitated dialogue and the need for Kosovo Serbs to reclaim a sense of agency through a self-management system within the association/community of Serb majority municipalities. They appealed to the international community to support all efforts for a renewed engagement in good faith with the normalization process. Interlocutors again raised concerns over previous allegations of sexual harassment of Kosovo Serb women in public. All such allegations need to be investigated. Time and again, I have expressed my concerns regarding the closures of Serbia-run institutions and the consequences they are having on economic and social rights, especially for persons in vulnerable situations. UNMIK will continue to closely monitor their impact. I also reiterate my call to refrain from unilateral actions and urge outstanding issues to be discussed constructively and in good faith within the EU-facilitated dialogue. Mr. President, the recent decision of the Kosovo government to enable residents with documents from Serbia-run institutions in Kosovo to register civil status documents with relevant authorities is welcomed. This is one important component in remedying civil status challenges faced by non-majority communities and Kosovo Serb residents in particular. However, key gaps remain related to the scope, interpretation, and implementation of the decision. I encourage enhancing outreach efforts toward the communities concerned and join others in supporting the extension of the current 30th of April deadline. Mr. President, I condemn the attack on the Ibar-Lipens water canal on the 29th of November and reiterate my call for a comprehensive and transparent investigation to identify and hold accountable those responsible. I urge all leaders to act responsibly, avoid escalation, and to cooperate in bringing the perpetrators to justice. More than 1 year since the serious security incident in Banjska-Banjsk, I reiterate the importance of ensuring accountability through fair and independent judicial proceedings. This case, along with the Ibar-Lipens attack, highlight the need for effective engagement with mutual legal assistance mechanisms to support ongoing investigations and prosecution. Furthermore, I want to express my concern over the explosive device that was thrown into a newly opened Kosovo post office in Zvečan on the 1st of April, which caused material damage. Again, such acts of violence are unacceptable and should be fully and promptly investigated and perpetrators brought to justice. Mr. President, I underscore the central role of the Police Inspectorate of Kosovo in ensuring independent investigations into allegations of excessive use of force and ill treatment by police in northern Kosovo, including of minors. I urge that findings be made public to promote transparency and institutional trust. While the Inspectorate has opened a number of cases, follow-up and disciplinary action are essential to deter recurrences. In line with international human rights standards, I also encourage authorities to act on the recommendation of UN special procedures, including greater use of alternative to pre-trial detention. Mr. President, I am deeply concerned by developments involving the destruction of religious symbols, most recently against the Serbian Orthodox Church, which are incompatible with the right to freedom of religion and pose a risk of heightening religious and inter-ethnic tensions. I call on all to respect religious sites and promote tolerance. I also note the arrest of 16 individuals in Jakova and Prizren on 5th and 6th of April while they were on religious visit to pay a pledge. While most of the pilgrims were released, 4 are still in remand for 30 days. In the interest of safeguarding community rights, full implementation of the law on the use of languages remains essential. I note the recent expiration of the Language Commissioner's mandate on 25th of January 2025 and reiterate the Secretary General's call upon the Kosovo authorities to take measures promptly to appoint a Language Commissioner to ensure the protection and promotion of language rights and safeguard the rights of non-majority communities. Mr. President, trust building remains fundamental to fostering a stable and prosperous future for all communities in Kosovo. Despite the continued challenges which reflect a sense of lack of confidence in institutions and concerns over intercommunal relations, UNMIK stands steadfast in its commitment to bridging divides. At the core of our trust-building efforts are initiatives that uphold the rule of law, safeguard human rights, and actively promote the inclusion of women and youth in peace processes. In this setting, our mission is dedicated to fostering efforts on the ground that strive to build trust across communities, specifically by using our programmatic activities to focus on promoting inter-ethnic dialogue and countering divisive narrative to address the trust deficit. The UNMIK-supported Barabar Center hosted well over 100 events and thousands of participants, demonstrating its role as a hub for inter-ethnic dialogue and a safe space for communities to engage in meaningful conversations towards building a more resilient and inclusive society. Last September, as part of UNMIK's commitment to promoting women's inclusion in decision-making and integration of gender perspective into reconciliation, I had the honor and the privilege of participating in a high-level roundtable in Tirana. This was an event that brought together high-level representatives to advance gender mainstreaming in the process of normalization of relations between Belgrade and Pristina. UNMIK will continue to work with local partners to strengthen access to justice, support legal aid for all communities, and to digitalize court archives. Furthermore, and in collaboration with the civil society, UNMIK continues to promote property rights through targeted outreach. Working with youth remains at the center of the mission's trust-building projects to foster cultural understanding and long-lasting relationship to further resilience peace, particularly as there is less and less contact between different communities among young people than in earlier generations. In this regard, a project that includes joint visit to each other's cultural and religious heritage sites, involving a growing number of young participants from Kosovo Albanian, Serb, Bosniak, Roma, Ashkali, and Turkish communities, is helping to overcome mistrust among youth. In parallel, an innovative STEM education project is opening new horizons for girls in rural schools in diverse communities. Using mobile labs and dynamic science clubs to bridge gaps, spark curiosity, and empower the next generation of scientists and leaders. Mr. President, I wish to express my appreciation for the close cooperation and support we receive daily from our international partners, in particular KFOR, and the strength of our coordination with the UN Kosovo team. Together, and with your continuing support, we will maintain our focus on the rights and well-being of the people in Kosovo. I appeal to all of you in this august council to remain resolute in your support for peace, stability, and principled cooperation in Kosovo. Through collective commitment, we can help reinforce credible political dialogue, safeguard fundamental rights, and lay firmer foundations for security and increased prosperity. Mr. President, I conclude by extending my deep appreciation to you, distinguished members of the Council, for your sustained engagement with UNMIK's mission. Your continued attention remains essential to our shared efforts, and I thank you, Mr. President.
Je remercie.
I thank Madam Ziadeh for her briefing, and I now give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Marko Đurić, Minister for Foreign Affairs of Serbia.
Honorable President of the Security Council, distinguished members of the Security Council, esteemed Special Representative of the Secretary General, it is a great honor to address this esteemed body today on behalf of the Republic of Serbia. I take this opportunity to thank Secretary General Antonio Guterres, as well as the Special Representative of the Secretary General and Head of UNMIK, Mrs. Carolina Ziadeh, for their continued efforts in implementing the mandate entrusted to UNMIK by Security Council Resolution 1244. Serbia's position remains clear and consistent. We strongly support the continued presence and full engagement of UNMIK. After more than 25 years, the mission's mandate has not yet been fulfilled, and the challenges on the ground are growing more complex day by day. UNMIK's role is not only relevant, it is indispensable. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to outline 3 key points that I wish to emphasize in my address today. First, international principles must be upheld equally and consistently. In the year in which we mark the 80th anniversary of the founding of this largest world organization and the adoption of its most important document, the Charter of the United Nations, I believe that we must all ask ourselves whether we are today closer or further from the goals we have jointly set. We often have the opportunity to hear statements in this very building about the need and importance of full respect for the UN Charter, and in particular for the principles that guarantee the protection of the sovereignty and territorial integrity of internationally recognized states. I am proud to be the representative of a state that is consistently committed to the respect for the UN Charter and its fundamental principles, including the necessity of respecting the territorial integrity and sovereignty of both its own and all other UN member states. It is therefore natural to expect that these rules apply to all member states and that they are applied in equal manner, including the Republic of Serbia. I believe that today, whether we want to admit it or not, we are all aware of the consequences of the precedent set in 2008 by the unilateral declaration of independence of Kosovo. We warned in good time that once the principles of international law are broken, the question is how we can escape this vicious circle. Every country potentially could have its own Kosovo. And indeed, since 2008, we have seen an increasing number of situations questioning statuses of various regions, provinces, territories of sovereign countries, members of this organization. In fact, in the aftermath of the Kosovo precedent, this very Security Council has been overwhelmed with dealing with the consequences thereof. Second, the situation on the ground in Kosovo and Metohija is deteriorating, and Serbs are paying the price. Given the time constraints of today's meeting, I cannot possibly list all of the unilateral actions and ethnically motivated incidents committed by the currently governing regime led by Albin Kurti, but I must highlight several that exemplify a disturbing and dangerous pattern captured in his own words. Serbs must suffer and pay. In recent months, Pristina has escalated its campaign to systematically dismantle institutions of Serbs throughout Kosovo and Metohija. These are not symbolic gestures. They have direct, painful, daily consequences for real people. Salaries, pensions, and social assistance to thousands of Serbian families have been cut off. The very means of survival for many of our compatriots have been placed at risk. On January 15th this year, we witnessed a coordinated effort by Pristina to close institutions of Serbs in Kosovo Polje, Gračanica, Lipljan, Velika Hoča, Orahovac, and other enclaves south of the Ibar River. This was not only a political provocation, it was a calculated attempt to erase the collective identity of Serbs in these communities. It is hard to imagine that anyone could consider such actions conducive to dialogue or reconciliation. Only weeks later, on February 21st, social welfare centers in 4 northern Serb majority municipalities were forcibly closed, leaving over 1,500 vulnerable individuals without access to essential services. In such circumstances, how can we seriously speak of normalization and trust building? These examples bring us back to the same question we have been asking for 12 years. When will the community of Serb majority municipalities, which has been signed and agreed under the auspices of the EU facilitated dialogue, be established? The answer, as made clear by Kurti's actions, is that there is no political will in Pristina to fulfill this legally binding obligation. Instead, we see an ethno-nationalist strategy built to induce fear, intimidation, and exclusion. What we witness is not accidental. It is the direct fulfillment of a promise made by Albin Kurti himself. In September 23, he stated, and I quote again, "Serbs will have to suffer and pay." Those words were not just rhetoric. They have become policy, and their consequences are unfolding before our very eyes. This same strategy was at the heart of Kurti's campaign ahead of February 9th elections. Conditions for Serbs to participate were anything but free or fair. It would be difficult, if not impossible, to describe these elections as free and fair in any meaningful sense. For over a month, the official results of the elections in Kosovo and Metohija were not announced, allegedly due to a software error. In the end, one parliamentary seat rightfully belonging to a Serbian representative was effectively taken away. This was done by orchestrating the participation of ethnic Albanians to vote for a representative handpicked by Kurti instead, allowing a candidate to win not through the support of the Serbian community as prescribed by the constitution, but by predominantly with Albanian votes. To make this paradox even clearer, when similar cases occurred in previous years, where Serbs allegedly voted for candidates from other communities, such elections were swiftly annulled. Such playing with voting system and practices undermines both democratic integrity and trust in the institutions that are supposed to guarantee fairness and representation for all communities. We have also previously seen the same pattern clearly reflected in the blatant violation of Article 96.5 of the so-called Constitution of Kosovo. By appointing a representative in a previous Kosovo government without any legitimate electoral support from the Serbian community, the very spirit of Article 96.5 was clearly violated. This provision was not designed to fulfill ethnic quotas on paper. It was meant to guarantee genuine political participation of non-majority communities in Pristina's institutions. The law is clear, but it is being set aside for political convenience. Recently, Kurti's regime has initiated a widespread campaign of persecution against prominent Serbs in Kosovo and Metohija for their participation in protests in late 2022. This is happening despite written guarantees given to Belgrade and to Kosovo Serbs by the European Union and the United States in December of 2022, assuring that no Serb would be arrested or prosecuted for taking part in those demonstrations. On the contrary, Serbs have been arbitrarily detained under these accusations. What we are witnessing is yet another clear indication that Kurti is determined to follow through on his own words that, again, Serbs will have to suffer and pain. Since Kurti came to power, 20% of the remaining Serbs have left Kosovo and Metohija. Attacks against Serbs have increased by over 50%. And let us not forget, more than 200,000 Serbs have been displaced since 1999, with fewer than 2% able to return. These are not just statistics. They are a damning indictment of the reality on the ground, a reality met too often with deafening silence. Let me remind you that since the establishment of the international presence in Kosovo and Metohija, 9,530 ethnically motivated incidents have been recorded. In the reporting period alone, there were 63 such incidents, and in 25 cases, members of the Kosovo police were directly involved. In 4 of those cases, children were assaulted. 13 young people were detained and subjected to physical violence. What kind of a message are we sending to future generations? What kind of future are we shaping? Since we last met here, home of Milica Mihajlović, a single mother from Zvečan, was ransacked and her son was threatened with death by those meant to uphold the law. Is this the new reality being imposed on Serbs in Kosovo and Metohija? Because from where we stand, this is not coexistence, this is repression. Ladies and gentlemen, for Serbs, Kosovo and Metohija is not just 13% of our territory. It is the heart of who we are. It is the home of our most sacred monasteries, the seat of our church and the foundation of our identity. That the Patriarch of the Serbian Orthodox Church is denied the right to visit the Patriarchate of Peć in 21st century Europe, despite the presence of thousands of international personnel, is unacceptable. Is this the image of a modern multi-ethnic democracy that Pristina wants the world to believe in? Or is this a carefully curated illusion? What Kurti is doing to the Serbs in Kosovo and Metohija is not an act of care for citizens. It is targeted, deliberate, and systemic ethnic revanchism. My third and final quick point. The dialogue remains the only viable path forward, but it must be built on trust. The image I have presented to you today is indeed bleak. In these circumstances, it is difficult to talk about establishing trust, which we all agree is a prerequisite for any dialogue, including the dialogue between Belgrade and Pristina. We believe that at this moment, new strength and new energy are needed to revive the dialogue, which has not shown any real progress or results for a long time. In this context, the new EU Special Representative for the Belgrade-Pristina dialogue does not have an easy task, but he has our full support to do everything in his power to establish the necessary trust between all parties in the process in these difficult circumstances. A wise French proverb says, "Mighty oaks from little acorns grow." We believe that the best way to restart the dialogue is to build the much-needed trust through economic cooperation and infrastructure connectivity, while simultaneously making efforts to implement all the commitments undertaken so far. The role of the European Union, United States, and other partners in the period ahead will be crucial, and we call for stronger engagement in order to continue the dialogue and find a compromise. As before, we will strive to be a constructive and credible partner in the dialogue, and the EU Special Representative Peter Sorensen can count on the full cooperation of Belgrade. Distinguished members of the Security Council, in conclusion, I can only point out that everything I have spoken about today must serve as an alarm for the international community. Kurti's regime has to be stopped on his self-proclaimed mission that Serbs will have to suffer and pay. We take this opportunity to appeal to the Security Council to respond in a meaningful way in order to prevent irreparable damage to the survival of Serbs and other non-majority communities in Kosovo and Metohija, as well as the destabilization of the entire region. I assure you that the Republic of Serbia remains clearly committed to building peace and stability, both in Kosovo and Metohija and in the entire region. Despite what some may think and how they choose to act, I'm convinced that there is no alternative to dialogue, and I hope that you share my view. Serbia will always be on the side of dialogue. However, we must not forget that the D in dialogue stands for participation of two sides. Thank you.
Je remercie son...
I thank His Excellency, the Foreign Affairs Minister of Serbia, for his statement. I now give the floor to Ms. Donika Telvaja-Sforz.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, President.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to address the Security Council on behalf of the Republic of Kosovo. Distinguished members of the Security Council, let me please begin by reminding all of us on a historic moment. On March 24, 1999, NATO intervened under the leadership of the United States of America to stop a genocide in Europe. After all diplomatic efforts had failed to stop a mass murderer and war criminal, the civilized world took decisive action. This intervention was not only legitimate, it was existential. It represented the protection of the core values of the United Nations and humanity itself, halting a genocide already in motion, saving countless lives, and standing firmly against mass atrocity crimes. It ended Serbia's genocide and mass killings. From the devastation caused by Serbia's aggression and from the sorrow of its genocidal campaign, the people of Kosovo rose up and emerged stronger. Today, 26 years later, Kosovo is a sovereign, independent state with rule of law and aligned with the free world. Kosovo is firmly anchored in the West while maintaining strong ties with all our international partners. The Republic of Kosovo is a true example of how international intervention against genocide, with sustained international support, has enabled the establishment and flourishing of a full European and Western democracy. Despite strong opposition from Serbia and Russia and their allies, Kosovo has become a full-fledged democracy and a respected international partner. Let me echo the words expressed in the Council of Europe during Kosovo's membership process. Dora Bakoyannis, rapporteur for Kosovo's accession, stated, I quote, "Kosovo is a functional democracy that respects human rights and the rights of its communities. 82% of the members of PACE, more than required, favored the membership of Kosovo in the Council of Europe. And in fact, yes, we are a democratic country, and we are proud of it.
In the light of our painful past, we have built institutions that reflect democratic values, rule of law, and human rights. Kosovo today is a vibrant democracy, young, resilient, and oriented towards Euro-Atlantic integration. But Serbia has not changed very much. It continues trying to destabilize our democracy. Worse, it does so not only through rhetoric, but through concrete, violent actions that endanger regional peace and security. Mr. President, on 24th of September 2023, the Republic of Kosovo was the target of an armed incursion by a Serbia-based and Serbia-backed paramilitary group, led by Milan Radojcic, a man publicly known to be linked to Serbia's political leadership, including the current foreign minister, Mr. Đurić, and President Vučić himself. Publicly available photographs of Mr. Đurić sitting with Radojcic in a Belgrade cafe underscore this network. This was an act of open aggression against a neighboring country carried out by a military group with military training, equipment, and logistics from Serbia. According to the UN General Assembly's Resolution 3314, this constitutes aggression. Calling it a serious security incident, as the UNMIK report does, is not only a mischaracterization, it is a distortion. The facts are plain. Serbia sponsored, armed, trained, and politically supported this group, which killed the Kosovo police officer Afrim Bunjaku and attempted to occupy territory within our sovereign borders. These tactics, reminiscent of Russia's hybrid aggression and the use of unmarked paramilitary units in Crimea, have no place in Europe. This was not just terrorism. It is an act of war. Excellencies, on November 29th, 2024, the Iber-Lepens Canal in the Republic of Kosovo was deliberately targeted with explosives in a kinetic, military-grade attack against critical civilian infrastructure. This act put at risk the water supply, electricity, internet connectivity, and heating for hundreds of thousands of people, including private households, but also schools, hospitals, and other essential public services across multiple municipalities. The objective was unmistakable: designed to terrorize our population, disrupt daily life, and cause widespread harm. Following the attack, the Republic of Kosovo officially requested international cooperation to investigate the incident. While Serbian President Vučić publicly pretended that Serbia would investigate and cooperate as well, in fact, Vučić refused to even respond to the many requests made by European and international institutions to live up to his promise. His refusal not only undermines the investigation itself, but moreover signals his continued and dangerous attitude to protect murderers and terrorists. We request from Serbia to fully cooperate with international investigations and also to hand over Milan Radojcic and other criminals to the authorities of the Republic of Kosovo. Continued impunity only emboldens future acts of aggression. Mr. President, let me be clear about the status of UNMIK. UNMIK is losing credibility as a source and as a UN agency every day. Its behavior and its actions are hindering observers and the UN to get a realistic picture of the developments in the country. To be clear, UNMIK is not hindering or hurting Kosovo in its development anymore. It is hurting the credibility of the United Nations. Our concerns regarding UNMIK continued presence must not be misunderstood, because Kosovo continues to work closely with numerous UN agencies, such as UNDP, UNICEF, UN Women, and others that are partners in our development. However, UNMIK no longer serves a purpose that justifies its continued presence. While other international organizations, such as OSCE, the Council of Europe, and the European Union, consistently provide assessments of the development in Kosovo, UNMIK keeps misrepresenting facts and by that misleads this Council as well. This is also evident in how the report framed Kosovo's legitimate efforts to enforce the rule of law and combat organized crime. Kosovo has achieved significant success in dismantling illegal criminal structures that have long established a space of lawlessness in the 4 northern municipalities. As part of these efforts, 13 drug labs supported by the Serbian state, producing drugs for millions of young victims across Europe, worth hundreds of millions of euros, were dismantled. Weapon depots and other equipment linked to terrorist activities were discovered and destroyed. These actions enforce the law and protect our citizens. Yet, UNMIK's report echoes Serbian propaganda and portrays these actions as destabilizing, misleading about their causes, their purpose, and their importance for peace. A similar misinterpretation is UNMIK's view of trials in absentia, particularly in cases involving suspects of war crimes. These trials are not a matter of choice, but a necessity since Serbia systematically protects war criminals. In one recent case, the court in Brussels, not in Kosovo, in Brussels, convicted 3 individuals for plotting and executing the assassination of a Kosovar journalist in Belgium. Serbia still refuses to extradite them. The same applies to war crime suspects tried in Kosovo. In the Rezal massacre case, 3 individuals were convicted in absentia for the killing of 98 civilians. Trials in absentia remain the only legal option to ensure justice and counter impunity. Excellencies, we call upon UNMIK to finally address the reality on the ground without misleading ambiguity. Bańska was an act of paramilitary aggression by a state against another state. Iber-Lepens was a kinetic, military-grade attack by a state against another state's critical infrastructure. Serbia's current regime continues to undermine peace, not only in Kosovo, but throughout the region. And it is cracking down on millions of its own citizens in Serbia who want to break free from the regime that has suppressed them for many years. Language matters, dear ladies and gentlemen. How we describe these acts will determine whether deterrence prevails over impunity, whether aggression is emboldened or pushed back. Kosovo remains committed to peace and cooperation. However, peace has never been preserved by tolerating aggression. It has always been preserved by confronting it head-on. As Kosovo keeps upholding democracy and the rule of law with overwhelming public and international support, Serbia is heading in the opposite direction. In recent months, once again, literally millions of citizens in Serbia, not in Kosovo, in Serbia, led by students, vastly supported by teachers, workers, and others, keep protesting against the corruption, repression, and autocratic regime of President Vučić. While Vučić's minions, like Mr. Đurić and Deputy Prime Minister Vulin and others, take turns visiting Moscow, reinforcing Serbia's alignment with authoritarian powers, the country's internal crisis and tension is deepening. Serbia is now under increasing scrutiny in the Council of Europe, is called before the European Court of Human Rights, and will face a mounting crisis as long as the Vučić regime keeps rejecting the legitimate requests from democratic forces in Serbia and from its democratic neighbors in the region. At the same time, Kosovo keeps moving forward, politically, economically, as a free, peaceful, young, and optimistic society. We keep strengthening our institutions, enforcing the law, and fighting corruption and criminal networks. We also strengthen our security, just recently through a trilateral security and defense agreement with 2 NATO members, Albania and Croatia. We all know what the root cause for tension in the region is. Serbia exports instability, while Kosovo and its partners export security, partnership, and cooperation. And while Serbia refuses to align with Europe on the greatest test of our time, Kosovo stands firmly with its partners in defending Ukraine. We will not waver in our commitment to the victory of Ukraine against the Russian aggression, in defending their democracy and thereby defending European freedom against an imperial, barbaric, and ruthless Russian leadership under Putin. Mr. President, in closing, we call upon the Security Council and the international community to take clear and decisive action in response to Serbia's ongoing aggressive action in the region, including against Kosovo. Kosovo will continue its cooperation with international partners to maintain stability in the region. Kosovo will continue to ensure that those responsible for violence and terror are held accountable. However, no one can turn a blind eye on Serbia's relentless efforts to destabilize the region. While Kosovo is making significant progress on our path to full integration into NATO and European Union, and in the future also finally the United Nations, we are building lasting bridges with all nations. It is time for the international community to recognize the reality that the Republic of Kosovo, as an independent state, is making its way into all of the international frameworks, step by step, success after success. Now, we as sovereign and peace-loving nations need to come together and take the necessary steps to counter the ongoing threats and to secure enduring peace and stability in the Balkans. Merci beaucoup, Mr. le Président.
Thank you, President. I thank Ms. Zhelvaya-Svorts for her statement.
And I give the floor to the permanent representative of the Russian Federation.
Господин председатель,
Mr. President, we are grateful to the Special Representative of the United Nations Secretary General, Caroline Ziada, for the briefing on the situation in the province and the assessments that have been shared. We welcome the participation of the Foreign Minister of Serbia, Marko Đurić, during this meeting. We have listened to Madam Donika Gevela-Švarc, who yet again exercised in sharing lies, the inaccurate assessments, and claims of geopolitical assertions. Next time, Mr. President, we will raise the question of the participation of this civilian in a meeting on Security Council Resolution 1244. Somebody should should brief the presidency not just on rules of participation in the meeting, but also rules of custom here. And decency, the rules of conduct and decency. And what the Madam Đurić portrayed a rosy picture of the situation in the province, this rosy so-called democracy. We shall see whether or not that is the case. The report of the Secretary General on the whole reflects a trend towards a significant escalation of the crisis in Kosovo, The main reasons have remained unchanged. They include Pristina's chauvinistic policy vis-à-vis the Serbian community, as well as the policy of a number of Western countries as they undermine the international legal basis for resolution. The document notes a large-scale liquidation of Serbian institutions in the province, incidents of desecration of Christian sites, expropriations of land, illegal detentions, as well as extrajudicial persecution of non-Albanian citizens. Extrajudicial persecution of non-Albanian citizens. Let us note that the rampant lawlessness by the Pristina leadership is a continuation of its policy towards the expulsion of Serb residents. Other artificial problems remain unresolved. They include the establishment, the persistent prohibition on circulation of the Serbian dinar, obstacles to delivery of goods from central Serbia, growing crime against Serbians and their property, destructive activity of so-called mayors of the four northern municipalities, as well as obstacles to travel obstructions regarding travel to the province by representatives of Serbia and the Serb Orthodox Church, and attempts to restart vehicular transport along the bridge crossing the Ibar River in Kosovar Mitrovica. Under these circumstances, it is hardly surprising that the pace of the return of refugees and IDPs to the province remain exceedingly low. Over 6 months, only 55 people, 29 of them Serbs, have been. There is an ongoing exodus of the Serb population over the past 18 months. Approximately 20% of the Serbs residing there have left Kosovo. In order to reverse this negative trend, Belgrade has initiated the adoption of measures to support the most vulnerable non-Albanian residents of the province. We believe that this is a responsible approach which deserved full-fledged support. Still, there has been no investigation into the water canal attack in November 2024 in Zubin Potok. The leadership in Pristina, without any evidence at hand, as is their custom, has demonstrably shifted and pinned blame on the Serbs, capitalizing on the incident as a pretext to escalate repressions and to carry out brutal detentions. We have noted the positive assessment in the report regarding the conduct of 9 February elections in the so-called parliament in the province. And at the same time, what has been disregarded is the fact that there's been an exclusion of the leading party of Kosovar Serbs, the Serbian list, from observation mechanisms. Also disregarded were machinations during the vote, which led to a figure from the local Serb community under the control of the Kosovars being foisted onto the so-called assembly. Moreover, the report fails to contain any information whatsoever about sabotage by Pristina of the Brussels Agreement dating 2013 to 2015 with Belgrade on the establishment of the community of Serb-majority municipalities in Kosovo. Such actions undertaken by Kosovar Albanians fly in the face of what has been agreed upon in dialogue under the aegis of the U.S., and they render the negotiations process meaningless, and the mediators themselves are not helping either. Each unilateral step undertaken by Pristina is something which they meet with purely formalistic condemnations, addressing their calls to exercise restraint to both sides. Essentially, the proposal to Belgrade is to accept the fait accompli. At the same time, we are shocked by the obstinate nature with which EU representatives are advancing the Brussels-Ohrid understanding dating February-March 2023, which merely exists on paper. Let us recall that the aim of this verbal understanding is to prompt Belgrade to engage and initiate the de facto recognition of Kosovar pseudo-independence. And this yet again attests to the inability of Brussels to act as an honest broker. Let us recall that in 2008, the United Nations Security Council supported the Secretary General's proposal for the EU to play a greater role in Kosovar settlement, fully in accordance with Security Council Resolution 1244. 17 years have elapsed. Subsequently, in 2010, the General Assembly welcomed the willingness of Brussels to facilitate dialogue between Belgrade and Pristina. 15 years have elapsed. An analysis of the current situation clearly shows that the EU is not in a position to influence Pristina in any way. Albin Kurti openly stated during the campaign that he had no intention whatsoever to establish the community of Serb-majority municipalities in Kosovo. Brussels' position, as it obstinately disregards the tragedy of anti-Serb ethnic cleansings in Kosovo, incites the local self-governing bodies in Pristina and to continue to oppress the Serb population. EU mediation has completely failed. We fail to understand why the EU delegation, under these circumstances, is requested to participate in this meeting of the Security Council, clearly as a reminder of their existence through the authority of the Security Council to attempt to burnish their own authority, and image which lies in tatters when it comes to the question of resolution. Paradoxical as it may seem, instead of resolving the main problems plaguing the province, the Pristina regime's efforts and those of its NATO patrons are geared towards, on the contrary, exacerbating those issues. An announcement was made about a transition to the final stage of the so-called establishment of the so-called Kosovo army. There are ongoing deliveries of material from NATO countries. We are talking about drones, armored vehicles, anti-tank systems, artillery pieces, as well as other weaponry. There are plans to procure air defense systems, as well as helicopter gunships. Foundations are being established for a local defense industry. The foundation is being established for a local defense industry. This is all an egregious breach of Security Council Resolution 1244. We are particularly concerned by the signing on 18 March by Zagreb, Tirana, and Pristina. They signed a joint declaration on some kind of cooperation in the area of defense. And at the same time, the so-called Premier Albin Kurti openly talks about the anti-Serb focus of this alliance and is championing dangerous Greater Albanian rhetoric. Furthermore, he's announcing a sharp increase in the military budget, cynically emphasizing the succession between the so-called Kosovo security forces and the former terrorist Kosovo Liberation Army, whose leaders are presently on trial at The Hague. We trust that the special court established there will fulfill its tasks to see to it that all perpetrators of the crimes be duly punished. Mr. President, we believe that in order to stabilize the situation in the province, Pristina needs, as soon as possible, to lift the discriminatory decision against the Serb population and for its Western patrons to revisit its approaches towards militarization of the province and Kosovo settlement as a whole. Specifically, it is past time to propel the wayward regime of establishing a community of Serb-majority municipalities in Kosovo, as was enshrined more than 10 years ago in the Brussels agreements. One wonders whether we will hear from the EU representative about what real steps they intend to undertake to break this deadlock. The facts we have voiced today further reaffirm the need to keep the situation in Kosovo on the agenda of the Security Council, regardless of attempts by representatives and patrons of the Pristina regime to persuade us of the opposite, especially given that this situation is clearly at odds with the rosy picture which representatives of Pristina once again are trying to persuade us of. Instead, we would like to hear from Madam Gervalla Schwartz about what steps were undertaken to hold Kosovo Albanians accountable, those responsible for the assault on 28 May 2019, the assault of an UNMIK staff member, Mikhail Krasnashokov. We would like to have clarification and explanation regarding the illegitimate designation as a persona non grata of staff member Andrei Antonov in 2021. As we know, Pristina has no authority to expel UNMIK staff. Mr. President, in the light of the lack of progress in resolution, the focus of the international community's attention on Kosovo should not wane. We categorically object to reducing the frequency and change in the form of Security Council meetings on the Kosovo issue, and we also object to the reduction of the budget and staffing. For UNMIK, we support the prompt achievement by Belgrade and Pristina of a lasting, mutually acceptable resolution on the basis of Security Council Resolution 1244. This is the only possible solution, and this needs to be endorsed by the Council. Thank you.
Je remercie Monsieur le représentant permanent de la Fédération.
I thank the permanent representative of the Russian Federation for a statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of the United States.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. And thank you, Special Representative Ziadeh, for your briefing. I also recognize the presence of and remarks from the Kosovar Foreign Minister. Madam SRSG, we recognize your leadership and UNMIK's past efforts in Kosovo to foster dialogue and legal reform. But the time to draw down UNMIK has arrived. We recommend UNMIK begin transferring its functions to other UN agencies on the ground better suited for this work, so the process toward ultimately terminating the mission is deliberate and gradual rather than sudden. The United States is committed to rooting out unnecessary spending in international organizations. UNMIK is a peacekeeping mission without peacekeepers, with 81% of its budget going to staff salaries, even as the mission has long outlived its original mandate. The United States calls on fellow council members to revisit UNMIK's mandate so we may together commence an orderly winding down of its operations. The time to begin this transition is overdue. As we have said before, UNMIK no longer has a role in the governance of Kosovo, and the mission remains oversourced and overstaffed. With respect to future meetings on UNMIK, we strongly urge they may be closed-door meetings, as a closed format would foster a more candid and less performative discussion. We also believe these briefings should be further reduced to annual meetings, given the demands on the Security Council's time. Kosovo and Serbia must work to lower tensions, refrain from escalatory measures, and build peace and stability between them and within the broader region as a foundation for a more prosperous future. The ultimate goal must be for mutual recognition. Normalization of relations between Kosovo and Serbia is essential to stability in the Western Balkans. America and the global community are safer when countries resolve their conflicts peacefully, and more prosperous when they create the climate for expanding international trade and investment. Je vous remercie, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Je remercie.
I thank the representative of the United States as the president, and I give the floor to the representative of Algeria.
I now give the floor to the representative of the United Kingdom.
Thank you, Mr. President. Let me begin by thanking the Special Representative and her team for all the work they're doing in Kosovo and for the briefing today. And let me welcome the foreign ministers of Serbia and Kosovo to the Chamber, as well as the delegation of the European Union. Mr. President, the UK is a long-standing friend of Kosovo. We remain committed to supporting Kosovo's Euro-Atlantic aspirations and its development of an inclusive and multi-ethnic democracy. During his visit to Kosovo last week, the UK's Foreign Secretary reaffirmed our commitment to that goal. We welcome Kosovo's recent elections. These were assessed by international observers as peaceful and competitive. The UK looks forward to working closely with whoever forms the next government. As a strong supporter of Kosovo's statehood, we welcome Kenya's recent recognition of Kosovo, adding to the many countries recognizing Kosovo across the globe. We encourage those who have yet to recognize Kosovo's independence to do so. Mr. President, while the Secretary-General's report rightly points out the pressure felt by many Kosovo Serbs, we also welcome actions that have been taken to improve community relations, such as Kosovo's successful efforts to recruit police officers from non-majority communities. We regret, however, that no judges or prosecutors from non-majority communities have, to our knowledge, asked to be considered for reintegration into the Kosovo institutions. And we look forward to active participation of Kosovo Serbs in peaceful municipal elections during the next reporting period. More broadly, Mr. President, we encourage Serbia and Kosovo to engage constructively with the EU Special Representative Peter Sorensen to reach a comprehensive and legally binding normalisation agreement through full implementation by both sides of the Brussels and Ohrid agreements. We strongly encourage Serbia to bring to justice without further delay those responsible for the 2023 attacks on KFOR troops and in Banjska, and to fulfil its pledge to cooperate in the investigation of the attack on the Iber-Lepench Canal. I would like to end by expressing the UK's gratitude to the Special Representative and all mission staff who've contributed to UNMIK's work. However, with conditions on the ground now unrecognisable from 1999, as we've said before, we believe it's time for the Council to review UNMIK's role and responsibilities to ensure it can continue to effectively support security, stability and human rights in Kosovo in a way that reflects the world of 2025. Thank you.
Je remercie, Monsieur.
I thank the representative of the United Kingdom. I now give the floor to the representative of China.
President, I welcome the presence of Serbian Foreign Minister Đurić at today's meeting. I have listened carefully to the briefing by SRSG Ziadi. I wish to make the following points. First, in the recent period, the Kosovo authorities have forced the closure of a number of Serbian-run institutions, repeatedly violated the security of the Serbs, encroached on and squeezed their living space, and triggered tensions on the ground. China expresses its grave concern in this regard. We urge the Kosovo authorities to stop these erroneous moves, to earnestly respect and safeguard the legitimate rights and interests of the Serb community, and to reduce ethnic tensions. Second, in recent years, the Kosovo authorities have taken a series of unilateral actions, such as the mandatory requirements regarding ID cards and vehicle license plates, the insistence on holding municipal elections in 4 northern cities, the ban of the Serbian currency dinar, the violent searches targeting Serbs in northern Kosovo, and the push for opening Ibar River Bridge, which have frequently created trouble and led to continued tensions and volatility in northern Kosovo. We urge the Kosovo authorities to stop unilateral actions, to return to the right track of dialogue and consultation, and to work with parties concerned to maintain peace and stability on the ground. Third, last November, an explosion occurred at a water canal in northern Kosovo. The SRSG and the international community have called for a comprehensive investigation. Serbia has expressed its readiness to provide support for the investigation at any time. We urge the Kosovo authorities to conduct a transparent and impartial investigation into the incident and to avoid a hasty characterization that could once again escalate tensions and intensify confrontation. Fourth, the coexistence of multi-ethnic communities in Kosovo is shaped by history. Tolerance, reconciliation, and harmonious coexistence among communities serves the long-term and fundamental interests of all parties. The 2013 Brussels Agreement should be effectively observed. The establishment of the Association of Serb-majority municipalities is an important element of the agreement and a key obstacle in the current dialogue process between the two sides. We urge the Kosovo authorities to implement it as soon as possible through concrete actions. Fifth, the European Union has long been working to promote a settlement of the Kosovo issue. We hope that the EU will maintain an objective and a neutral position and use its good offices in a fair and impartial manner. We hope that the parties will engage with the new special representative for the Belgrade-Pristina dialogue in discussions on a political settlement of the Kosovo issue. Sixth, UNMIK plays an important role in maintaining stability and promoting national reconciliation. The United Nations and the Security Council should continue to maintain their attention to and input in the Kosovo issue. All parties concerned should also support UNMIK in full implementation of its mandate and support the work of SRSG Ziade. President, China's position on the Kosovo issue is consistent and clear. We support the parties concerned within the framework of Security Council Resolution 1244 in reaching a mutually acceptable solution through dialogue and consultation. In this process, the sovereignty, independence, and territorial integrity of Serbia should be fully respected. I wish to emphasize that the countries and peoples of the Balkans have suffered too much from wars and conflicts. All parties should draw lessons from history and work together to prevent the Balkans from being plunged into turmoil again. China stands ready to work with all parties concerned to continue to promote enhanced dialogue and engagement and peaceful coexistence among ethnic communities of the region and the early political settlement of the Kosovo issue. Thank you, President.
Je remercie.
I thank the representative of China for that statement.
And I will now deliver a statement in my capacity as the representative of France. I thank the Special Representative, Madame Caroline Ziade, for her presentation and wish to assure her France's full support as she discharges her duties. I welcome the presence of His Excellency Mr. Marko Đurić, Minister for Foreign Affairs of Serbia, and Her Excellency Madame Donika Jervala-Schwarz, Minister for Foreign Affairs of Kosovo. France applauds the conduct of parliamentary elections in Kosovo on 9 February. The elections were carried out without any major security incident. They were both competitive and inclusive, as was reported by the EU Electoral Observation Mission. France applauds the participation of the Serbs of Kosovo. We hope that a government will be expeditiously constituted in order to make progress in the implementation of the Brussels-Ohrid Accords, which are a priority. Serbia and Kosovo are aware of France's steadfast commitment alongside Germany to help normalize the relations. Normalization is a sine qua non for the integration into the European Union, to which the peoples of the two countries aspire. On the 1st of February last, Mr. Peter Sorensen was appointed a new special representative of the European Union, tasked with facilitating dialogue between Belgrade and Pristina. He has been tasked with generating new momentum for dialogue in order to reach an agreement to in a lasting and definitive way resolve the disputes between the two countries. This is also the goal sought by the Security Council. In order to achieve this normalization, France urges Serbia and Kosovo to honor the commitments assumed under the Brussels-Ohrid agreements. On 15 January, the Kosovo government announced, however, the closure of Serb administrative structures in Kosovo. This decision is to the detriment of the daily lives of the Serbs in Kosovo. We deplore this unilateral action when we recall that the status of Serb structures needs to be resolved through the establishment of the Association of Serb Majority Municipalities on the basis of the European Draft Statute. France will continue to monitor the status of the Serb population in Kosovo. Preservation of the multi-ethnic nature of Kosovar society requires an establishment of representative democracy in the north of Kosovo. We call on the Serbs in Kosovo to resume their active participation in local governance, maintenance of public order, and the judicial system. Furthermore, it is unacceptable that the perpetrators of the Banska attack remain at large. They need to be held accountable. France condemns the attack, which took place on 29 October 2024 against the Iber-Lepen Canal, and we urge the parties to shed full light on the circumstances of the attack. We applaud the Serb president's commitment to supporting the investigations. We invite the Serb authorities to fully cooperate with the European Union Judicial Assistance Mechanism. Lastly, France applauds the efforts of UNMIK in reinforcing rule of law, respect for human rights, as well as intercommunal reconciliation in Kosovo. These efforts to rebuild trust, particularly vis-à-vis young people, are vital for stability and security in Kosovo. I applaud, for example, the activities carried out at the Barabar Center in Pristina to foster intercommunal dialogue in a spirit of recognition and mutual respect. UNMIK, KFOR, and ULEX Kosovo are operating in complementarity. Their combined efforts present a model for cooperation for the benefit of the people of Kosovo as well as the stability of the country in the Balkans. UNMIK's mandate is linked to a normalization of relations between Serbia and Kosovo, and France supports the extension thereof on behalf of peace and reconciliation in the Balkans, on behalf of the conviction of a peaceful cohabitation among communities, and on behalf of the European aspiration of the peoples in the region. I thank you, and I now resume my duties as the President of the Council.
Je donne la parole.
I give the floor to the representative of the United States.
Président, and my apologies for retaking the floor. However, I did realize that, or I do realize that I read my remarks a little too quickly and inadvertently neglected to acknowledge the presence of the Serbian foreign minister, and that was simply an oversight on my part, and I do apologize, Foreign Minister Duric. My apologies. Thank you, sir.
Je remercie le représentant.
I thank the representative of the United States for the clarification, and I now give the floor to His Excellency, the head of the delegation of the European Union to the United Nations.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much.
On behalf of the European Union and its member states, the candidate countries North Macedonia, Montenegro, Albania, the Republic of Moldova, and Bosnia and Herzegovina, as well as Andorra, align themselves with this statement. And like others in this room, let me thank the SRSG for her briefing and the two ministers for their presence. Colleagues, the European Union and the Western Balkans share a common future and face urgent challenges that we can only overcome together. We owe it to our citizens to build a future of peace and prosperity based on shared principles and values and common interests. The future of the Western Balkans is in our European Union. We once again reconfirm our full and unequivocal commitment to the European Union membership perspective of the Western Balkans. President, the United Nations General Assembly welcomed the readiness of the European Union to facilitate a process of dialogue between Kosovo and Serbia. The European Union welcomes that Serbia and Kosovo reaffirmed their commitment to the EU-facilitated dialogue and the process of normalization of their relations, and pledged constructive engagement in the process to move it forward quickly. We reiterate that the agreement on the path to normalization between Kosovo and Serbia and its implementation annex, adopted in February and March 2023, respectively, must be fully respected and implemented as soon as possible without preconditions, as all EU-related commitments, along with other pending commitments reached in the EU-facilitated dialogue led by the High Representative Kaja Kallas and supported by the EU Special Representative Peter Sorensen. This includes the establishment of the Association Community of Serb-majority municipalities in Kosovo. And Serbia is expected to initiate the recognition of Kosovo's documents and symbols. The European Union remains deeply concerned about the situation in the north of Kosovo. Kosovo and Serbia must pursue sustained de-escalation efforts, refrain from unilateral and provocative actions that could lead to tensions and violence, and avoid divisive rhetoric. Furthermore, we reiterate that the status of Serbia-supported structures and services is foreseen to be resolved in line with agreements reached in the EU-facilitated dialogue and Kosovo law. We call on Kosovo to enable the reintegration of Kosovo Serb judges, prosecutors, police officers, and other personnel into all Kosovo institutions they left in 2022. The Council of the European Union has expressed its expectation that the reintegration will be done without preconditions by Serbia, in accordance with dialogue agreements and with full respect for Kosovo's legal framework. Allow me to also reiterate the European Union's expectations that Serbia will fully cooperate and take all the necessary measures to apprehend and urgently bring to justice the perpetrators of the 2023 attack in the north of Kosovo. In this context, allow me to underline the need for full accountability and that we deeply regret that Serbia has taken insufficient actions in this respect. President, the European Union recalls the importance of Kosovo's close cooperation with the EULEX mission, as well as other relevant international actors. We reiterate the importance of and our support for the work of the Kosovo Specialist Chambers and the Special Prosecutor's Office, and we underline our readiness to assist them in the implementation of their mandate. Monsieur le Président,
Mr. President, the European Union wishes to welcome the elections held in February 2025. Elections that were held without incident with the participation of all communities under a new electoral law regime in Kosovo, with the implementation of the recommendations of the previous mission of the European Union. We invite all the deputies of the Parliamentary Assembly of Kosovo, with the community of Serbs of Kosovo, to participate actively and constructively in the proceedings of the Assembly. It is critical for this autumn for inclusive municipal elections to be held with the full participation of the Serbs of Kosovo without preconditions in the 4 municipalities of the north.
President, in conclusion, the European Union expects Serbia and Kosovo to engage in good faith in the EU-facilitated dialogue on a comprehensive, legally binding agreement on normalization of relations in accordance with international law and EU law without further delay. Normalization of relations and implementing their dialogue commitments are essential conditions on the European path of both parties, and both risk losing important opportunities in absence of progress. Finally, it bears repeating, as I underlined at the start of this intervention, that the European Union and the Western Balkans share a common future. Even as we face urgent challenges, we can and will only overcome these together. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much.
Remercie.
I thank the head of delegation of the European Union for his statement, and I give the floor to the Minister for Foreign Affairs of Serbia, who has requested the floor for a last statement.
Esteemed members of the Council, I express my concern and regret due to the fact that we have not heard a single word of commitment to the dialogue or to the implementation of the agreements reached under the EU-facilitated dialogue by Mrs. Donika Gervala-Schwarz here today. What we have heard instead was a series of accusations against my government and against UNMIK, which is unacceptable and actually sends a very bad message about the relations towards a mission sent there by the UN Secretary General and by this august body. The institutions in Pristina are once again taking advantage of the opportunity to address the members of the Security Council, accusing Serbia of an alleged genocide committed in Kosovo. It is a narrative without any grounds, which they often use for daily political purposes. The term genocide should not be misused anywhere and anyhow, especially not for political and sensationalist purposes. This kind of rhetoric in general, blanket assessments, and claims without any evidence are frivolous, not founded in reality, and serve to score cheap political points. Such irresponsible claims threaten any possibility for progress in the normalization of relations between Serbs and Albanians, Belgrade and Pristina. Finally, if we are talking about the ethnic composition of the population of Kosovo and Metohija then and now, we should also clearly present the facts and say that in Kosovo and Metohija today there are over 90% of ethnic Albanians, and that Serbs have suffered in the previous decades, been victims of crimes and been expelled from their centuries-old homes and forced to leave their homes due to intimidation, discrimination, and threats, as has been well documented in the reports from UNMIK and other international monitoring missions. If we really want to build a common future, we must act responsibly. We must say that the biggest victims in Kosovo and Metohija are innocent civilians, regardless of their ethnicity. We cannot allow one side to completely assume and claim the role of victim and deny any crimes committed against the Serbian population. The families of the harvesters in Staro Gacko, the children killed in Goraždevac, the victims near Radonjić Lake and in Klečka, as well as each of the 200,000 Serbs who were expelled from Kosovo and Metohija by the so-called KLA, of whom only 1.9% achieved a sustainable return, and who even today cannot return to their homes in Kosovo and Metohija, also deserve answers. Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed Mrs. Gervala-Schwarz also referred to the report by Dora Bakojani about the situation in Kosovo and Metohija, which was used in front of the Council of Europe. But she failed to mention that in this report, there were clear demands made to return the land to Dečani Monastery, to establish the community of Serb majority municipalities, and also to end the practice of unlawfully expropriating Serbian land. And in fact, none of these demands by the Council of Europe Special Rapporteur have been met, which is a very important fact which was omitted here, I do believe, with a purpose. Also, I need to emphasize that when it comes to the attacks in Banjska and on the Ibar-Lepenac Canal, Serbia clearly condemned these incidents. In fact, we demand accountability and clarity, as unfortunately out of the 4 individuals who tragically lost their lives in the Banjska attack, 3 of them were ethnic Serbs and 1 of them was an ethnic Albanian. And our government unequivocally condemned these incidents and attacks. But premature claims about responsibility and, more significantly, denying information to the investigation, which has been requested by Serbian authorities through the mutual legal assistance mechanisms, does not help achieve justice on these issues. And also, it's worth noting that when it comes to the Ibar-Lepenac attack, the Serbian community in Kosovo is the primary community which has been affected by the disruption in supply of drinking water and electricity, and that Serbia has also offered assistance to repair the damage that has been done and which has since been thankfully accomplished. Also, I would like to welcome the interest expressed by Mrs. Gervala-Schwarz in domestic Serbian politics. It is always good to hear that there is a will to engage actively in Serbian politics by representatives from Pristina. However, insults that were mentioned here by Mrs. Gervala-Schwarz against Serbian leadership, against President Vučić, will not contribute to the normalization of relations or to the improvement of the political climate. Accusations and smearing against President Vučić is not something that is welcome, and I just want to say that speaking about authoritarian behavior, President Vučić actually is giving each and every day a master class in democracy in comparison to what we are seeing in Kosovo when it comes to both the freedom of movement and the right to gather. I invite all those from Pristina's side who are interested to participate in our political life to do so in a transparent way and in proper institutions and not in the form of smearing in front of the UN Security Council. Finally, amid the current situation, the Republic of Serbia has justified concerns following the latest news about the signing of a trilateral memorandum on security cooperation by which Albania and Croatia, together with the representative of the provisional institutions in Pristina, have taken steps to undermine the stability in the region, sending a message that they do not want a stable and future-oriented region by engaging in a defense treaty which could trigger a new arms race. I would like to draw the attention of the UN Security Council and the international community that in a frail region, at a very sensitive moment, an agreement on military cooperation is being reached without consulting some of the closest neighbors, among which the Republic of Serbia is not the only one. This violates the spirit of the 1996 agreement on sub-regional arms control, as well as the Security Council Resolution 1244, according to which KFOR is the only military force in the territory of Kosovo and Metohija. It is my duty to point out the harmfulness of such moves that threaten to revert us, at least verbally, to a period that we all want to leave behind. And I want to take this opportunity as well to strongly urge everyone in the region to focus on the future. Dear members of the Council, you can count 100% on Serbia to work on retaining stability, to advance good neighborly relations, and to work towards creating a region of success rather than a region of division and grievances that we have seen in previous decades. Thank you.
Je remercie.
I thank His Excellency, the Foreign Minister of Serbia, for a statement. Madam Donika Ževera-Švarc has also requested the floor. I give her the floor for a final statement.
Thank you so much. To be very honest, I listened carefully to Mr. Đurić, and while I could respond point by point, I will not, because we have heard all of that before. The same old narrative, the denial, deflection, imagined victimhood. And I'm sure that this doesn't work anymore. So I will go on some points where I believe there is a need for some clarification. I start with what Madame Ziadeh said about the pilgrims that were stopped, and some of them are arrested and detained in the last days. And yes, 4 of them have to stay for 30 days in prison because they are members of Serbian intelligence structures, hiding their identity and pretending to be pilgrims and having really dangerous objects with them. So it's now on police and justice to deal with that matter, and it's not no more a political thing. Here was mentioned that Kosovo is denying the Patriarch of the Serbian Orthodox Church to visit Kosovo. The last time he wanted to visit Kosovo was from the 16th to 18th of January. We sent the message that because of very important commemoration day of victims of Serbian violence, these 2 days were not possible, but we showed open to do it 2 days before that or whenever it would convene to the Patriarch, because it was not a special religious day, it was just visiting the Patriarch. So we never get a request after that, so it's no problem visiting Kosovo, but we have special days where it is simply difficult and would be understood for many of the victims as provocation, so that we need to be careful what we choose as dates for visiting Kosovo. Yes, we had good elections, and we did not have only this time good elections. We have a tradition of having free, democratic, and inclusive elections. And so I'm happy that in the next days we are working hard on building a new government, and in the next days and weeks everybody will have the chance to follow what is happening on that. The Bainska attack, dear ladies and gentlemen, is so clear because it's everything on the video footage got by the drone.